So now I'll move on to the conventions I think I've challenged. Firstly, I'll start with this sort of style of my trailer. So I've used the cinematography and the editing and stuff that I've done has created this arty sort of expressionistic style, if you like, which I did originally to tie in with the storyline of my trailer, which is about an artist. And I wanted to create this arty style like for aesthetic purposes, but also to sort of be suggestive towards, what the film is about. So I'll use this shot as an example. So this is an extreme close-up, and it's slightly off-center. And I also asked the actor to sort of angle his face a bit, and it kind of makes him look a little bit unstable and stuff, which is what we sort of gather from the film as a whole. It also, it goes out of focus when he leans back and stuff. And these things aren't sort of very conventional. Like you wouldn't usually have an off-center image within a frame. For example, this one, it's very like a lot of them use quite central. Everything's a bit centered. And the out of focus thing. I don't think I've ever seen a thriller do that. But it's just they are suggestive. The out of focus might suggest that his mind is a bit like of a blur, and that off center thing as well. Suggests he's unstable, but it's not something you'd see in a thriller, and that's why I think I've challenged this sort of the conventional style of a thriller. I've also used a lighting effect on it, which I spoke about earlier, called hard light, which again adds a bit of mystery and it intensifies the whole image. I think thrillers are usually more focused on an interesting storyline. And not necessarily, cinematography and lighting and all that stuff. But I think because I've added this, it gives something else for the audience to admire. And even if they don't notice it specifically, some people just go to see a film because of the storyline. But there are others that, like proper film fans that really actually pick out the cinematography and, analyze it for different things. And I think, for these people, it will obviously be much more interesting, but also just for, normal film goers, normal thriller watchers, it does add to the experience as a whole. It adds to, it makes it more interesting to watch. A film that I looked to for inspiration for this arty style was Seven. This film was it got good reviews just for storyline, but it also got a lot of reviews on its cinematography. So I thought it was that's where I basically got the idea for doing this arty style from, and I also thought it would fit well with my art themed storyline. But yeah, they use quite a lot of interesting shots, a lot of interesting like dark sort of lighting, and like a lot of reflection used, like reflection in glasses, reflection in water, and so on. But they also use this thing called rule of thirds, which is like a principle that says if there's 4 like crucial points in a frame at which you should place points of interest, and that will sort of create a more interesting and look to the shot. And I said in my research that I wanted to use this, so yeah, I did follow through with that, and I have used some. And yeah, this again like adds to the sort of arty look of the whole thing, and it's just something that not that many thrillers use. As I said, they're more focused on making an interesting storyline as opposed to interesting shots. Another convention that I think I've challenged is the use of dialogue, or the lack of dialogue in my trailer. I've done this because I wanted to create sort of like more of an atmospheric trailer, and create a feeling within the audience of like, a bit of mystery. When there's no talking, you don't really know what's going on. Although they know what's going on because there's a voiceover and stuff, they're still sort of a little bit in the dark as to why he's stalking this woman and what really is going on. This also sort of links back to the artiness of the trailer as a whole. It kind of, by the silence kind of makes it almost an art form, because you're just watching, you're just looking, you're not hearing much, you're just looking at these images and understanding it from the different, what you can interpret from the different shots and what you can interpret from the narrator maybe, and so on. It also does leave a little bit to the imagination of the audiences, and I think also the idea is that the Thomas, the stalker, is actually, even though he is a stalker and is, you know, depicted as the villain, he is actually quite a shy and timid guy who's a bit lonely, doesn't really speak to anyone. So it kind of reflects his character as well, the fact that there's no speaking. And this is actually quite unconventional as well, having a villain that's quite quiet. Villains are often presented as, you know, these intimidating, scary guys. So to have a villain that's like quite isolated and a bit shy is again quite unconventional. So for the poster and magazine front cover, I think I've primarily used the conventions that, you know, of a magazine and poster. I think the reason I used them as opposed to developing or challenging them is because I think it's probably easiest for when trying to advertise a film to stick to the conventions of a poster and magazine, because people only see them for such a short amount of time. You know, you might see a poster on the tube or on a bus or a magazine cover on the shop shelf, unless of course you buy it. But that means I think people need to feel familiar and comfortable with what it is that they're seeing. They need to know that it's a poster or a magazine front cover in order to, you know, want to understand what it is that they're advertising. Whereas with the trailer, you've got more time, I think, to entice people. So it doesn't really matter whether you use the conventions or not. Well, obviously it does matter, but you've got more scope to play around with them a bit, because you've got a longer amount of time to try and persuade them to see the film, whether you use the conventions of a trailer or not. So I'll start with the poster. So one of the conventions I've used is like the use of a close-up face shot, which I found was quite conventional for thriller, not action thrillers. Action thrillers were often like long shots, but stalker thrillers anyway were always sort of close-up shots. But more specifically, the sort of split screen, there's like a sort of a divide between the villain and the victim, which I found was conventional in sort of stalker thriller posters. Then of course is the title, credits and tagline, which I found were all on the bottom third, well usually conventionally in the bottom third of the page. The title is obviously big and bold and stands out amongst the other text. The tagline is just below the title, which was quite conventional as well. And then the credits were just below that with a coming soon text at the bottom. And of course the text at the top as well with the actors' names, which was quite conventional as well. It's also quite conventional to use dark colours in a poster a thriller poster, and or like shadows, and I use that in mine. Obviously, I think this is because again you see a poster for such a short amount of time, they want to just make the audience straight away know that this is a thriller and it's going to be dark. And for the magazine, I chose Little White Lies, and so I stuck to their conventions basically, because they're their own publication. They're not there to advertise films. They're just there to feature films, and so I stuck to their the conventional sort of arty style of their front cover. I used a sort of pop arty look on my magazine. And also the title of the film on the front cover of Little White Lies is always very small, and the font is always completely different to the font that's used with the poster and trailer. And obviously I've done this as well. I've used a completely different font to the poster and trailer. I've also obviously used the same masthead, the same Little White Lies masthead, which I made on Photoshop just to look as similar as possible to the actual masthead. Another thing that I've done that's conventional is the way that I've linked the three texts. Obviously, most production companies and marketing companies have got to use synergy somehow to make sure that audiences are aware that they're advertising or featuring the same film. I've obviously done this. I've linked them by using the same actor and the same title of the film. But mainly I found what was conventional was using the same actor in the three texts. And it was conventional also to use the same font style for the film title in the poster and trailer, but not necessarily the magazine, because obviously, again, they have their own house style that companies have to adhere to.